How is everybody? Well, welcome to our lecture for the exhibition Atra. I am pleased to say that the Faculty Speakers Committee has been instrumental in making this panel possible, and thank them for that. Thank you all for coming, but the main thing I want to say is please come to the opening tonight at Hunt Gallery for the exhibition Atra, where I will talk more about what that means, including the spelling in Sanskrit of it, if I have to, but I might not. That's an insider joke, by the way. Okay, so the three speakers today have an astounding background. They have, I'm not going to do I said that if I spent the next 20 minutes, I might have made it through the CV of one of them. They are all have enormous accomplishments of exhibitions and publications nationally and internationally. But what I've done, I think, is maybe, according to the universe, an impossibility, is ask three art professors to speak for only 15 minutes. And we'll see how that goes.
How about themselves?
So I'm just going to do the basic introduction, and then we'll proceed. Our first speaker is Shreepad Joglekar, who is the department chair and associate professor of photography at Kansas State University. His MFA is from Texas Tech University, and he will have a lot to discuss. Shreyas Krishnan, whose MFA is from MICA. She is assistant professor of illustration at Washington University. And finally, Priya Kambli, who is associate professor of photography at Truman State University with an MFA from the University of Houston. That was the short version. You can add more as you go along. Please welcome our first speaker, Shreepad Joglekar.
Thank you, Jeff, and thanks to the institution as well. This is a fabulous opportunity for all three of us and everybody else in the exhibition to share our work, and especially I was thrilled to be part of this exhibition to kind of see it come together along with these amazingly accomplished artists. It's always a pleasure to kind of show your work in proximity of another sort of fellow artist. I'm going to quickly kind of go over a set of images that I have been producing for the last 15 years, I would say, since I graduated from my master's program. And what I want to really show in showing all that work, even though some of those or most of those works are complete, I'm not working in that direction anymore, is to show the trajectory of my thought. Because I really feel that the work that we make is a product of our own struggles in understanding the world, our own approaches towards sensing the reality that is surrounding us. And when we look at our work change over time, it is essentially a reflection of our understanding, our knowledge, our approach changing over time. And so I begin here where after graduation, the kind of first work that I was interested in making was sort of looking at place, looking at American place, and then kind of absorbing all kind of ironies and interesting juxtapositions, interesting environments, and sort of this completely alien sort of landscape that I found myself in. I come originally from Mumbai, India, which is a city of like 12, 14 million people. I went to grad school for 3 years in Lubbock, Texas, which is a city of 200,000 people. And I got my first job in Victoria, Texas, which is a city of 60,000 people. And now I work in Manhattan, Kansas, which is 25,000 people. So you can see the pattern in my movement through geography, getting to increasingly less populated space. And these are observations along the way, is what I see around my place. And what I'm noticing here is the approach that a lot of photographers have taken before me for decades, is to kind of just document your vision, right? It's an evidence you produce that you were there and you saw this. And you want to share that vision, that perspective, that observation that you made with people, right? And photography is the easiest way of doing so. And so these images were sort of in response to where I found myself, right? This is a body of work I made called Landscapes for Fun, looking at places where people drive ATVs, and that's a form of fun for a lot of people, enjoyment, pleasure, right? And I'm always curious about how we conduct ourselves in a natural space, in an open space, in public space, and how we shape it, right? How we change it, how our actions, maybe for fun, maybe for pleasure, maybe for economic reasons, how they shape our environment, right? And so this project focused on 4 or 5 different ORV parks, off-road vehicle parks in Kansas, Oklahoma, and New Mexico. And this is sort of like the landscape. This is where people are able to have fun. In looking at these places, at the same time, I found myself sort of looking at the history of photography, how the survey photography in the American West is sort of a landmark kind of sort of set of images that inform our understanding of place and space. And I'm kind of paying a homage to that with the treatment of the photographs, the way they're printed. These are shot on film, they're printed on in the darkroom in traditional ways. And so there's that thing about almost like stepping in the shoes of Timothy O'Sullivan and sort of like working with my large format camera only in a place maybe as foreign as it was for him, it is for me to go to a RV park, especially coming from Mumbai. And so I found lots of parallels. Like I'm looking at this place, this is as foreign as it can get, and I'm curious and I'm really fascinated by its features and the way it has come to be, and the way it keeps on changing, right? The way it evolves over time. Later, this is the work that I started maybe in 2014, 15, when I was in Kansas State and I became aware of the military establishment. So we have one of the oldest sort of military posts at Fort Riley, which is just 10, 15 miles from where I live. We can actually hear them practice, right? So I got a license to go in through lots of red tape and look at the places where the soldiers practice their craft. And so these are places that are called live fire villages, and these are sort of on the prairie. This is the imagination of Afghanistan and Iraq, right? And so they have created these small hamlets that look like a village that a soldier would come across when they are landing in this place across the globe. And this is where they practice what they're going to do, how they're going to move through the place, what they can expect as buildings, as environment, right? And I have had sort of an interesting kind of push and pull relationship with this place, because I really like a place that is devoid of advertising, banners, visual pollution, and at the same time I'm aware how this is a theater of violence, basically. This is where practice for violence takes place. This is the rehearsing place for being good at what you do, which is basically violence. And so I'm kind of looking at these places again, primarily as a witness. I'm here, I can see this, other people can't, I'm going to show them, I'm going to take a picture, and here's how my intention behind sort of making my work. Fortunately, before the recent conflict between Russia and Ukraine, I got to go to Russia. I was there for a month for a residency in an island off of St. Petersburg's coast, and that really was one of the sort of informing moments for me, because I realized how I could make work like Stephen Shore did about Russian surface. So there is aging, there is patina, there is character, there is similarities in how poverty looks like in India or in other places in the world, and in Russia. And so I became a little bit skeptical about what am I photographing? What am I doing by simply seeing this? Because this kind of looks, yeah, it can look similar in other places. It is difficult to tell the larger story and the history behind the surface, which is only what I can see through my camera. And that experience further was informed by an event that happened right here. There's a little red balloon there. This is a place where a murder happened, and it was well recorded, very well viewed, very well commented, and there were lots of consequences. And it kind of made me think that there's no way I can make a picture, even if I go there. Pictures have been made already. Videos have been made in live while the murder is happening. What can you do as a person with a camera about a reality, about a topic, about a subject that is of this nature, right? And that's where my recent work kind of comes in, which is what is in the exhibition. There are two bodies of work. One is called Tempora Incognita. This is the time not visited. And what I'm really now focusing on in both of these bodies of work is to create images that are not surfaces that you could see, places that you could actually visit with a camera and a tripod, but these are the places that I create using sound that is recorded as a document of a moment. And these are renderings that look like landscapes, but that are not real places. These are the places created by sound. These are the places that are reverberated because of a particular moment, typically of violence or a grave incident. So these are essentially frequency mapping of sound into sort of the topographies that the sound themselves kind of create. There are two images from this series in the exhibition, and followed by that. So to give you an example, like how difficult it is to make a picture of a situation like this. So these are the mountain ranges, the ridges that you would imagine the American West, but these are also the ridges that are created by the volley of bullets fired from an Apache helicopter in Helmand province in Afghanistan, right? So, so you have, some of you might be familiar with the video that WikiLeaks leaked. It's called The Collateral Murder. There's plenty of writing, there's plenty of documentation on it. There's plenty of consequence of the people who were involved in that, on their psychology and so on. But there's no way that you can really tell the story of every bullet that was fired, right? The command that was given right before the bullet was fired. And how do you visualize the terror of that kind of violence, right? And so, so the only way for me to kind of approach these subjects, which I feel should not be photographed, and sometimes could not be photographed, is to document the sound, to make it into a place that you can visit for contemplation. I really feel that the ephemerality of sound really escapes sort of the ability kind of to make you sink in that reality. And I want to create a place where you could imagine visiting as a landscape, which is a completely fabricated space using the sound that records the moment. And the patterns that it creates, the places are unique based on the kind of sounds that I'm recording, I'm listening, and I'm hearing. The other kind of sort of like the bookend of that project, or thinking about making work now, is to kind of go back to this this quote from Marx. Is that he mentions how philosophers have wasted or spent too much time in describing the world, and the real challenge is to change it. Right? Descriptions are not enough. The real task is to change it. And so here is my attempt, is kind of describing the reality. Right? This is a picture I made when I got to Kansas. This is courthouse building right next to my apartment, and this is the eagle right in front of the courthouse. And I've tried to mark the eagle several times. Every time I go by, right? I really feel like I feel uncomfortable with that claw, with that threat, with that sense of power and dominance, right? So I've tried to mark it. Then I thought, like, I need to kind of like go one step beyond and reimagine it. How do I want to reimagine today's reality as if it's a fossil that we found 20 years from today, 20,000 years from today, yeah? And so these are, this is the series called Future Perfect, in which I'm trying to sort of create a version of what's available, what's seen, what surrounds us today, as if we are archaeologists looking at it thousands of years from now. And so these are all the things that I've shot, right? And then I'm altering them. The process that I use for this work is photogrammetry. It's typically a process that is used to document fossils, which can't be handled, right? And then you can create essentially a sculpture, digital sculpture, using photographs as your raw material. And so this is my imagination of that eagle. This is how I would sort of see it in my dreams in the future as a fossil of an artifact that comes from today. So that's all I have to say, and this is the two bodies of work. You can see the examples of both in the exhibition that Jeff has put together. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Shri. I should point the word Atra in Sanskrit means here, as in here in this place. And so one of the things that the conceit of the exhibition is about is literally being in this place. And of course, we have spoken to his art being a lot about this particular location. But it's the location of those who have migrated from India to live here, which puts one in this sort of hybridity of consciousness of being from one place, from another place, and still in place. And so that was what we're trying to get at, and thank you for saying. And I'll see how badly I mess up the computer, and we'll go for it.
My files might go.
Oh, well, yeah, well, I was just going to, we knew what. Okay, and we're still working on art professors, 15 minutes, amazing thought. And there we are, Shreyas and Krishnan.
Okay, I'm design professor. I will keep design. I have timer running here. Okay, are there any designers or illustrators in the room? My people, hello, hi. Everyone else also hi, but special hi to the illustrators and designers. Okay, my name is Shreyas R. Krishnan. I'm an assistant professor at Sam Fox School of Design and Visual Arts from WashU. I teach illustration, comics, zines. I make a lot of those things also. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm from Chennai, India, which is a city on the southeast coast. Okay, I make non-fiction comics and zines, which is a very specific and niche things to say. I have a lot of interesting conversations with Uber drivers who want to know what I mean by non-fiction comics. Because as soon as I say comics, they say superheroes. Absolutely not. So the kind of stuff I make is about gender and visual culture, feminist movements, personal and cultural memory, South Asian identity. So they're very niche and very specific. And I'm going to show you some examples of works that sort of help you understand the different approaches I take to talk about these subjects. So one of the first things I made that helped me sort of consolidate this direction that I started moving in is this comic called Becoming Rosie, Rosie the Riveter in Performative Gender. It's a 16-page comic that takes this image that I'm sure everyone has seen, We Can Do It, takes that poster and sort of explores the cultural history of it, but examines it in context of Judith Butler's writing on performative gender to understand how one image sort of helped shape understandings of gender and how it sort of continues to echo in today's world. So this sort of takes the approach of taking gender theory, visual analysis, cultural history, and presenting it in a nonfiction comic format so that theory is also accessible to people and becomes something that is less intimidating for people to engage with. Another comic that I worked on, and this is sort of related to the kind of stuff that Shree was talking about because it begins with a photograph that was taken during a pogrom that happened in the western state of Gujarat in India and sort of follows it through and looks at media history and how anyone can take a photograph now because the tools we use for taking photographs have completely changed. So this comic, Select Focus, is in the exhibition along with this anthology that I edited with 5 other wonderful collaborators called Bystander Anthology. It has 50 different contributors who have all contributed stories that look at what it means to be a bystander in the South Asian context. So this comic looks at the responsibility of an image maker who becomes a bystander when anyone can take an image, anyone can be taking images, anyone can have their images taken. And it's easy to even create deep fakes and circulate images that are just not in your control anymore. So some of the things I'm really interested in this kind of work is capturing moments of cultural relevance and then engaging significant current events. So this one page from this comic, for example, is starting in 2002 and ends in 2016, and it's trying to capture 14 years of how cell phone technology has changed, which requires a lot of fun deep dives into what mobile phones existed in 2008. Which is fascinating, but also it has very specific moments of cultural relevance, which if you are from India, you might recognize some things, but also if you are millennial, Charlie bit his finger right there. So there's lots of little things that get embedded that people can recognize, but also people can learn more about. And in terms of engaging significant current events, there's a lot of pivoting based on what happens while media changes right in front of you when you were working on something. So that last page, in the comic, is talking about deepfakes. And originally our plan for that page was there was a deepfake video of Obama that was supposed to come in. And right while I was sketching that page out, we had one of the political parties in India released a deepfake campaign video, and that obviously had to go right in there. So just being able to sort of think about what is happening right now, how do I pull this in and make sure that the threads connect and people can understand and engage with what is happening right now and make sense of things through this format of comics that are deceptively simple and can trick you into engaging with complex subjects. Another comic that I've worked on is this educational, informational thing that is about legal procedures. So this one, I did not know about this until I got to work on this project, but it's about how 500 Indian welders got trafficked into the US and were held as basically indentured laborers on an oil rig. But this was really interesting for me to work on because this is also part of the immigrant experience, right? People who are brought in with the promise of something who then get sucked into something else, and these are stories that are important. But part of this is also a learning experience because I get to learn about these other people's lives that I'm sort of tangentially involved in. But also the format of the comic becomes a way for other people to recognize and know that these are things that happen to people and here are some ways in which you can help. So this was made in collaboration with Mosaic Family Services, who work with a lot of immigrants and people who have been trafficked or are dealing with those kinds of issues. We had to actually change the name of the company because they were worried. Because there was a lawsuit that was being counter-lawsuited. Fun things. So this is something I worked on recently. It's not published yet, but in the next slide, you're going to see a little bit of what my crazy process was like. So this is a comic called Body as Sight for a forthcoming anthology called Body Anthology, which is edited by Ronald G. Musher. Kickstarter coming soon, keep your eyes peeled, if you would like to get a copy of the book. But this sort of is, again, thinking about how all of these larger things like feminist movements, right, like movements for different rights, how sort of oppression and marginalization happens, like bigger picture things, but connecting it to like personal narrative. So this actually starts with what I feel about the term body as sight, and then sort of takes it through what does the body need when it's equates to land, what does it mean when the body resists. So there is a connection that I'm trying to make also with big picture things and small picture things, which the medium of the comic really allows me to do very effectively. So this is a 4-page comic, and on page 3, I've decided to do all the people ever who could be fit into a page. I have to say, I'm someone who goes into a comic saying, I never want to draw people, I hate drawing crowds, and then I always find myself drawing protests. Why do I do this to myself? So this page, you can see, is actually a tiny little history lesson that's crammed into one page, just starting with the Chipko movement, the Mera Pabis protesting the murder of Tangjung Manorama. There is a public rally demanding amendments to rape laws, which is actually the first big protest that led to the consolidation of this is what rape means in India, just on legal terms. On the other side is possibly the first gay rights demonstration in India after police assaulted a gay couple. And then this bottom panel is just a consolidation of a whole bunch of things, including protest demanding amendment to rape laws, anti-dowry demonstration, which was photographed by Shiva Chachi, an amazing photographer who contributed a lot to documenting through photographs the feminist movement in India. So it was nice to sort of insert her image in there as well. Nirbhaya protests from 2012. There's another poster by Shiva Chachi and Yogi Pangal that makes it in there. There is a counter-protester at protests against the queer film Fire. There was someone who brought it was a queer movie about 2 women who sort of get into a relationship with each other. And of course the moral police came out in full force, but there was one person who no one could see, but there was one image I found of this person who showed up and said, I'm Indian and lesbian, which sort of just broke apart that argument of Indians are not queer. That poster finds its way in there. There's the Gulabi gang. There's the students protesting the hijab ban. There's also a little tiny nod here. This book is called Na Shariram Nadi, which is in Telugu means my body is mine. And that sort of made its way in as a tiny little statement there, which connects back to the statement that's echoed through the story, which is my body is mine. Oh, and this is also a wonderful little pamphlet cover that I found. On the title it says Erika Padigirom Irimalai Vedikattum, which in Tamil means we are being burnt, let the volcano explode, which I thought was just fantastic. Sort of come back to dowry burnings, which is a thing that used to happen quite often in India. It still happens, but maybe to a lesser extent because of the advocacy of all of these powerful women. So the personal is also really important in talking about what nonfiction means and how we sort of connect to bigger ideas. So this comic is more autoethnographic, and I cried a lot while making it. It is about the music of Pakistani Sufi singer Abida Parveen, and the whole thing sort of meditates on the similarities between singing as a physical and performative practice and drawing as a physical and performative practice, and how both of those things sort of tie into this idea of believing in something. If I give you this comic ever, I will not be in the same room as you while you read it. It's too personal. I also said I make zines, so I don't just make comics. So the zine is a really interesting format to make something that is compact and easier to disseminate than a comic, which tends to be a little longer in form and people have to spend more time with it. So this one is called Alpha Breast. If I can make a portmanteau, I will do it. It is informational and has culturally specific information. It's a collaborative zine that I made with Krishnan, who is not related to me. It is an A to Z about dress, and it looks at processes, mythologies, pop culture, and slang. And one thing that is really exciting about this kind of work is to take existing facts from different places and put them in proximity next to each other, sort of like with the Becoming Rosie comic, where I get to say, oh, what does it mean when this image sits next to a lithograph by Ravi Verma that is on Kali? So here you get to see Kannagi, who is part of like Tamil literature, alongside another figure over here that is from like Eastern European mythology, and what kind of meanings you can unpack with our cultural understanding at large. And then there's also some fun stuff like coffees and drinking how much coffee. So this one is more observational and about personal memory and language. It's a collaboration with my friend Kritika Susarla, whose mother tongue is Telugu, my mother tongue is Tamil. Both titles say coffee and coffees in Tamil and Telugu. But it's mostly about what it means for us to be living in these different cities, drinking coffee in different parts of the world, and what kinds of little things come in there. So like in that one, for example, it says, yeah, the current will be back, which is how you say power in India. So there's little bits about language that are embedded, and just the different kinds of things you use to make coffee. That one is in the exhibition. And the last thing I'm going to leave you with is this zine that I made. There are many copies in the exhibition. You can like flip through it. It's a bilingual zine that prioritizes a Tamil reader over an English reader first. So if you are Tamil and you're reading this, congratulations. You have a thing that is made for you. So you get to flip through this thing and see all these fruits that grow in my home state. I set a 12-minute timer, so I'm still ahead. So you get to like flip through this zine and see all of these fruits that are grown in my home state of Tamil Nadu. And fruits that I don't get access to over here unless I go to United Provisions and buy like a really crummy version of it. I mean, what am I going to do with a tiny piece of a jackfruit, you know? But it's almost like life-size, so you get to open it up and see how big a jackfruit actually is, or how many different kinds of bananas you can actually get, and the small fraction of the different kinds of mangoes you might actually encounter. Every single person who's looked at this zine has told me, there's so many kinds of mangoes, and I tell them, my guy, this is just a small subset of how many mangoes there are. So the design elements in the zine are also sort of prioritizing a certain audience. Like I said, it is Tamil first and then English. So all the text you're encountering is first going to be in Tamil. The next thing you're going to find is how to say the thing in Tamil, but in English. And the last thing you will find is what it actually says in English. So even just from the title, it says, Kani, Tamil Nadu Sila Parangalai Patri or zine. And then it tells you, oh, K-A-N-I, Kani, a zine about some fruits of Tamil Nadu. So something that I'm working with now is also thinking about who is my audience, like who is my prioritized audience. Do I always have to speak to a general audience as someone who is not there but here? But can I speak to both groups in different ways where I still get to prioritize one group and not prioritize another group, but still be educated in some way about how I'm speaking to them? But yeah, so this one is also in the exhibit, and I'm done. Thank you.
So let's see how we went to this. Do you have a dongle for HDMI? Or just use this one?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can just go with it. Perfect. You ready, Clay? Where are you?
Oh, it started from the middle somewhere.
You set?
Yeah. Just so you
And finally, Priya Kambli.
Hi, my name is Priya Kambli. I'm a professor of art at Truman State University. It's about 3 hours up north, and I drove in this morning. Oh, yesterday. Like, can't remember what day is, right? Where am I? What day is it? So today I'm going to talk about sort of my artistic practice, which has sort of been a 20-some-year-long endeavor, right? And I'm going to talk about my artistic practice, which is sort of grounded in archival interventions. And I'm going to talk about 3 archives that I'm mining to make the work. The first archive is my patriarchal archive. And I call it that because all the images in this archive, my family photographs, are taken by men. All of them, every one of them, right? And so the three spaces in which these image making happens is home, where my father is the predominant image maker, and he's also the baker. He's a French pastry chef. And the Indian studios, where again a man is in play, and then my parents' wedding album, where of course the photographer is a male, right? The second archive that I'm looking at and thinking about is my matriarchal archive, and this archive has objects of worship from my mother's devara, which translates into house of gods. And you can see the image of my father in play. That's the only image I can find where both their objects or archives that I'm using are in play. And then the third archive I'm working with, and I can't even call it an archive, but it's a documentation. It's a government-issued Indian passport that was canceled and negated when I became an American citizen. And I could have done a dual citizenship, but I just had a baby, my second baby, and the idea of doing paperwork was just like not in play, right? So I gave up my Indian citizenship to become an American citizen. So before I dive into sort of my first archive and the images I'm making with it, I wanted to show you an image that belongs in that archive. As I mentioned, my father was the documentarian, so this is an image made by him. This is my mother, this is me and my sister. And the hole that you see is a cutting that my mother has done to the photograph, right? So this image or this photograph kind of becomes a foundational or a vocabulary on which my own artistic aesthetics come from, right? So, I've been really curious about this image as a child. I remember her doing this to multiple of his images and then sliding them back into the family album as if they were, again, like mundane family photographs, right? Of course they're not. They're tumultuous, right? But when I'm looking at these archives, I'm not necessarily looking at them from a point of view of a daughter. I'm looking at it from an image maker point of view, right? So it's very critical the way I look and think about this archive. And so I'm very curious about this mark because it's so sort of violent, right? So problematic and so like beautifully placed. She does this so violently, like just stabbing her face, carving out her face so that she doesn't impinge the image or information that's surrounding that image. So this image, even though it's my father's image, it becomes something else. So she recontextualizes it with her mark making in play. So the first set of images I'm going to show you come from looking at, these are my images coming from looking at the family photographs. And I always am asked, what is this? People think it's an installation because they feel that the way it's presented, unless you've seen it, they don't understand that these are photographs, right? And so just kind of want to preface that these are photographs. They are two-dimensional images, and they are very much about light in a way a photograph is, but they're also about so many other things in play, right? And so one of the things that when I'm working with the archive, I'm very aware that even though these are my family images, and I have them, and I have half of them. My sister has the other half, which is in India. The reason I have only half, I came here at 18, and I came here for reasons that were just unavoidable. There was early trauma in life. My parents passed away when I was 15, 6 months apart, and I was considered a problematic teen in India. They didn't know what to do with me. They were just like, ship her off to America. She has an aunt there. And so they did, and I came here at 18, and my sister and I understood the separation wasn't temporary, it was permanent. So we ended up sort of halving our inheritance. And what I have is half of the images, right? I have the entire set of my mother's objects of worship because my sister was like, you know what, I'm going to get married to an Indian man, and he's going to have his own objects of worship. He can have these. And so I have her entire set. Anyway, so I'm aware that these images, even though I claim them as mine, are actually not mine. They're appropriated images, right? So how do I make them mine becomes something that's in play, and the mine comes into play by this additive methodology. I'm very aware of how my mother's mark making recontextualizes a photograph and shifts the narrative, and I'm really interested in that shift. And I'm using that shift in a way that I understand by not violently erasing, but sort of as an additive process, and with materials that are very sort of domestic, very sort of humble, very everyday, kind of coming into play. This text, Baba, I'm working hard, comes from a letter I wrote to my father, and the letter is here in this image. And those of you who know what this is, the aerogram. So when you look at it, it's like a rectangular blue square, basically, and it's like an origami of a thing. And it has 4 sides, 3 of which can be for writing, and the 4th is for the address of the sender and the receiver, right? And so we're writing a letter to my father, so there are 3 people in play, and this is like family politics in play so much in this little tiny little sheet of paper, right? So I'm the youngest, so I get to go first, and my sister, who's the oldest, decides the order, right? So I go first, and I'm like, I'm 8 or 9 years old. I don't know what to write. I don't know writing letters, and especially I don't know what to write to an absent father. So I start off in English, because I'm going to an English medium school, and English is slippery. I do not understand it. So I switch very quickly to Marathi. And I write in Marathi the rest of the letter, and I feel so accomplished. I remember the feeling of accomplishment, of having filled my space, right? My sister goes next, and her first sentence is, everything that I have written is false. And then proceeds to write how it is false, right? And since she told me to go first, I can't negate her negation, right? And on the back is my mother's space, and it's empty. It's full of silence, right? And so we mail out this letter, which I've hated since I felt accomplished. I hate it instantly after that. And it goes away, and I don't think about it. And when I was going through my father's sort of things after he passed away, I find this letter. And my first instinct is to crumple it up and throw it away, right? Because that's what I wanted to do at 8 years old, right? But I instinctually keep it. I keep it because he has preserved it, and I get to keep the task of that preservation. And then 20-some years later, I'm working with this object again, and the first thing I do is erase my sister's writing. Even though it's in Marathi, and not a Western audience would be able to read it or understand, but I erase it, right? One rice grain at a time. And then I realized she's right. It's total baloney what I've written, so I'm erasing mine too. But, what did they do? So I erased mine too, but I'm really kind of really intrigued by the phrase, I'm working hard. I don't know what an 8-year-old means by working hard, but at 40-something, an immigrant in the United States, I was working hard, right? And so just a little performance of this. So this is flour on the floor, then each line goes in, and once it's done, it's sort of erased by basically sweeping away the entire thing. And I'll just kind of fast forward it. The studio had mice in it, so every day when I'd come back, a line was missing, and it was really fantastic. Then you can see we tried to plug every hole in the space so the mice wouldn't come, but they would come in and eat a line on the edges, and so I was like, oh, they're working hard with me. Fantastic. Anyway, so now I'm going to sort of jump into the matriarchal archive. So as I mentioned, this is objects of worship that belong to my mother. This work started in 2020, and there was a reason for this work to happen at that point. I had turned 45, and it was the age my mother was when she passed away. So I knew there was no longer any sort of parallel of us that I could see aging simultaneously. So I knew my archival work was done. I needed to kind of look and think about something else. And I also wanted to really kind of focus on things that she had touched, loved, and coveted. Because I understood in the archive what I was looking at primarily was for her, right? So these are silver gelatin prints. They, if you've done photo, you question why they don't look like black and white. Anyway, so these are silver gelatin prints, and the reason they don't look black and white, they look color, is because I fix them, but very gently. And before they get fixed in, for those of you who have done darkening processes, it goes through a developer, it goes through stop, which stops the developing action, and before it goes into fix, I turn on the light. And these spaces where there's no information, since it's sat under enlarger, it goes black, and these are the white spaces, and the white spaces shift color when it's not fixed, and once it shifts colors in a certain way, I fix it, right? So that's like the technical quickness of it. So this work is sort of about 3 generations of women too. You know, the work comes into play with these objects of worship that belong to my mother, and that's how she thought about them and looked at them, right? When I took these objects of worship, I didn't think about them as objects of worship. For me, they were sort of objects that belonged to her, so they became objects of mourning. They become objects of somebody, of things that somebody that I have loved has touched and sort of handled, right? And for my daughter, they just become objects of play. To her, there's no connection in that, right? So this is a series of cyanotypes that I'm making with the objects of worship. So in 2020, when I started making this work, we had also lived with 4 years of Trump in play. And I live in the rural Midwest, and those navigations were pretty treacherous, and I was feeling vulnerable. And that vulnerability was coming back into the work, and I was kind of thinking about, do I want my brown kids, my brown skin, my archives brown families being photographed and shown? Do I want that? Do I want the silver bodies of my objects of worship to be shown? You know? And the question was, no, I don't. I don't want them to be seen. And so it became a really interesting conundrum because photography represents, right? So how do I make images in a photographic space without representation coming into play? And so then, of course, I lean towards like darkroom processes, alternative processes, abstraction coming into the work. So what you're seeing, this is a cyanotype. It's one of the older historical methodologies. The objects of worship sit on a cyanotype, and I move them over the course of the day, moving them 30, 40 times, sometimes more than that, 60 times. It's like a game of chess, you know. Each move sort of negates or decides on something and create this patterning. So when I started making these images, it really was coming into play because my mother died from complications from breast cancer. And so kind of thinking about cells dividing and cells growing, right? But it becomes sort of also about a cyclical cycle of this lunar cycle that comes into play. And it references the column drawings that the women in south of India are making. And I've been really interested in the ephemeral, you know, and I wanted to make work that was ephemeral in some ways. But, you know, when you're working with photography, you're working with something that's concrete in some way or shape or form. And so I wanted to take the idea of women's labor, women's practice, and kind of bring that into play in my own photographic practice, showing the powers of them, right? So I was in London this summer, and of course we went to Tower of London because we want to see all the looted items that you know, England has, right? And of course there's the Kohinoor diamond, which comes from India, and there were rings of South Asian families plastered around this pillar, and in it I'm trying to shove my daughter in so she can see it, right? And it was fascinating to kind of think about this objecthood, like who does it belong to? That it becomes a possession, that it can be taken, it can be looted, you know, it can be conquered. So I was trying to think about how do I make an object that can't be owned, right? Like how do I make that in play? So what I'm doing basically is using my objects of worship, filling them up with flour and basically dumping them out, right? And then the last set of archival work that I'm doing is with this passport, and this is the work that's in the gallery. So in 2011, I gave up my Indian citizenship to become an American citizen. Both my kids were born and raised here, my husband's from here. I knew that I wasn't going back, and every time I traveled with them, I was in some other line. You know, it was just like this ostracized mother, you know, like waiting, where will my children come back? But anyway, it also meant like every time we traveled, it was a hassle because I had to get visas and all these things. And so I decided to kind of give up my Indian citizenship. I had had a green card for a long time. So it wasn't a decision that was made on whim, and it was a decision made also with like the political kind of content coming into play. I had left India at 18, I never voted. I hadn't voted in my entire life. And Obama was coming into play, and I was like, if I'm going to get to vote for somebody, you know, I think I want to be playing this one, right? And so I applied for American citizenship, got it, and one of the things that I hadn't quite like completely understood is that I had to turn in my Indian passport so I could get an American passport, right? And so when I turned in my Indian passport, I was like, goodbye, I will never see you. You were lovely, right? And off I sent it, and it came right back, it bounced right back to me. And in it was the stamp, like the quickest stamp, the quickest imprint that somebody could make. I think they had a little elf in the back that just went, you know, and stamped it all out, and it said passport canceled as the holder had acquired foreign nationality. And I found the language to be quite interesting. It erased any idea of race, it erased any idea of gender, it erased any kind of emotion, it erased everything. It was just an erasure, right? And my work really is kind of dealing with the personal, kind of dealing with my identity in play. So it was like, how do I insert self into this very distilled, very sterile language? So I'm playing with it and kind of trying to figure out how the insertion happens. So these are, again, silver gelatin prints made in the darkroom, and then they're hand cut for the letters. And I was at a residency at Headlands and sort of playing with language again, where acquired foreign nationality. So I sat down and made words that were embedded and acquired in foreign and nationality, and came up with this poem like Dear Grief, Tilt. And this is the one that's in the gallery, and it comes from looking at the page that has the stamp in my passport and doing blackout poetry with it. And so it reads, citizen, caution, holder, complied, holder, a person, holder, altered in way, holder, inquires, requests and requires, all those whom it may concern, she may stand in need. And just this little manifesto of me as an artist, like I am an American, I am an Indian, I am an immigrant, I am a woman, I am of color, I am a mother, I am an artist, I am an educator, I am a feminist, I am a survivor, I am a transgressor, I am the present, I am the future, I am a citizen. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow. So the prompt that I was going to give for a panel discussion was, how does being one who is in the state of hybridity, being an immigrant artist, how does that come out, or how is it affected in your art practice. And I don't think I have to answer the question. All three of you addressed it directly. Please come to the opening this evening, 6 o'clock. All of the artists will all the artists with us, there will be 5 of the artists, and you can engage them all then with all of your questions. It'll be great. Thank you all for this.
Thank you.
Thank you.